No One Lives Forever is one of those FPS games that never seems to get enough attention, but it has so much personality and charm, and it has garnered a cult following over time. Released in 2000 by Monolith Productions, No One Lives Forever is a massive love letter to spy films from the 60s and 70s. This game is a mix between classic James Bond movies and Austin Powers, and while I think No One Lives Forever is more about style over substance, it is still a solid experience. NOLF is set in the 1960s, and you play as Agent Cate Archer. She works at a secret intelligence organization called Unity, and at the start of the game, she is given her first major assignment. Since the game is set in the 60s, she has to deal with a lot of shit regarding her gender from the male Unity agents. But Cate rises up the ranks over that campaign and becomes a full-fledged operative. Along the way, you encounter all kinds of stereotypical characters, and NOLF pokes fun at everyone here. There's a kilt-wearing Scottish man, there's a ponytailed opera-singing German chick, and there's of course the stereotypical British guy with the good old mustache. Oh, and how can I forget the cocky, jacked American dude who reminds me of Chael Sonnen for some reason.
We have been waiting 3 years until your fight, so what is your feeling now? Tell?
Hello, sweet potato. What was the question? I was a little distracted. What'd you say?
I can see this character doing pretty well in a UFC press conference.
Ariel Helwani post-fight at UFC.
Ariel, is that camera big enough to take in the largest arm in Westland, Oregon that has found its way to Houston, Texas? Because that thing looks a little bit small.
Yeah, I think it is.
All right, well then we can continue.
Anyway, the basic premise of the game is that Unity's agents are mysteriously taken out, and then they find out that a terrorist group called Harm are plotting to infect the world with a deadly chemical weapon. Cate eventually stops Harm from destroying the population, they find the antidote in fucking space no less, and the world is saved. Now this story is very on the nose. You know almost every twist and turn that's going to happen before it does, and with a name called Harm, I don't think they can get any more obvious than that. That being said, I don't think Monolith were trying to tell a complicated or heartfelt story, and they were just paying tribute to the spy genre, in which they succeed. The story in NOLF is told through cutscenes, and while I enjoy the banter going back and forth between the characters and the game's more comic moments, there are way too many of these cutscenes.
Nothing.
I heard you. Tell me what you said.
I thought you wanted me to shut up. Now you want me to talk? Make up your damn mind.
You are testing my patience. Miss Archer, I suggest you drop your weapon before your obnoxious American friend forces me to silence him, once and for all.
I know you can skip them if you want, but I feel like they should have tightened up the cutscenes to make the pacing better. Of course, the story isn't everything, and that brings me onto the gameplay. The combat and level design in No One Lives Forever is good, and the game has some fantastic moments, but I do think it is just good, and not mind-blowing. The controls are responsive, the guns feel and sound fine, and I love the GoldenEye-esque animation for the enemies, but the game is more about style over substance, as I've said. There's nothing too deep about the combats, but that's ultimately fine because the game isn't about that at all. This isn't Quake or anything, and the personality of No One Lives Forever shines. I love the vibrant colours on display, I love the 60s hippie aesthetic, I love how Cate's gadgets are based on ordinary objects, I love the locations in each level, etc. The gunplay is second nature to the overall visual style and presentation, and that's alright because it's not like the combat is bad or anything. The first level of the game takes place in Morocco, and it starts out with you sniping enemies through a window to prevent an assassination attempt. This goes on for a few minutes, and I don't know why they didn't begin the game with something a little more exciting.
Coming out the front door of the hotel.
Luckily, the campaign picks up and the player gets to run and gun around Morocco. Like I said earlier, I love the enemy animations and how they are so expressive. When you shoot a bad guy that's above you and they fall down the railing, for example, it makes you feel like a badass. Speaking of which, Cate Archer is such a cool character in this game, and I appreciate that you sometimes choose different dialogue options for her during cutscenes. You can make her take the high road when other agents give her shit, or you can clap back and respond with an insult. I chose the latter whenever I could because you quickly latch onto Cate, and I think she is quite an entertaining character.
You can say what you please about me, but if you speak ill of Bruno again, I'll demonstrate my alarming lack of competence on your thick skull.
Her character arc isn't that complex or anything, and since this is a game filled with spy tropes and cliches, the plot goes exactly where you expect it to, but Cate and the characters around her are a load of fun. The next level is set in Berlin at night, and I want to applaud the developers on having pretty diverse locations. Sometimes there are slower moments in No One Lives Forever, but when you are starting to get bored of a level, more often than not, they switch things up completely. I also like the variety of objectives in each level, and how they don't just end with you running to the exit and flicking a switch. First-person shooters around this time often had this objective-based approach to level design, but NOLF does it very well nonetheless. In Berlin, the player needs to rescue Dr. Schenker, and he becomes a valuable asset later on in the game.
This was not part of the arrangement.
She is here!
Excuse me for a moment, Doctor.
He can be a pain in the ass to manage, and it's kind of annoying when he gets shot by the enemies, as it forces you to start again from your last save. In between most of the game's levels, there is a filled introduction / tutorial for the new gadgets you get along the way. First off, aside from the specific instances that you need the sunglasses, cigarette lighter, or codebreaker in levels, all of the other tools never get used. I like the idea of the explosive lipstick or corpse removers, but your best bet is to just kill everything with your guns. You can go around and be stealthy, but there's no real advantage in doing so. There are missions later on in the campaign where you need to go through undetected, otherwise you fail the task and need to start over, and I find these required stealth sections to be really fucking annoying.
She's here!
The stealth mechanics feel really inconsistent, and there is no way to lean over to look at what's ahead of you, which again makes these parts annoying to deal with. Back to the equipment items though, I feel like the gadget tutorials sprinkled in between levels are charming at first, but then they start to lose their appeal as you do it over and over. That being said, the next level has you falling out of a fucking plane, and this is an awesome set piece. The player needs to grab hold of one of the henchmen with a parachute attached and descend down safely. The combat encounter beforehand when you're inside the plane is also awesome, and I find unexpected turbulence to be a very solid mission.
Please be full of hay! Please be full of hay!
Germany is where the next level takes place, and this is when the player meets Tom Goodman, the stereotypical American spy character I mentioned earlier.
Listen, Vandalay, I will do a home invasion on you. I will cut the power to your house, and the next thing you hear will be me climbing up your stairs in a pair of night vision goggles I bought in the back of Soldier of Fortune magazine.
The nightclub setting is colourful, and again, I love the energetic 1960s look of everything. This level heavily contrasts with the next mission, where the player needs to board a cargo freighter to find a lead. I do think NOLF is at its best when it's leaning into the ridiculousness, and this dock level is a little too drab for my tastes. The same goes with the dive mission, where you need to head down into the submarine to obtain some information. However, I do like the part with the divers and how you need to take them out with your spear gun. Around this portion of the game, Unity gets an important message from Harm and how if their demands are not met, they will kill 1 million people with a biological weapon. The Harm message being presented by a puppet is exactly what I mean when I talk about how I love when this game goes a little zany with its style. Speaking of this game being ridiculous, there is an entire mission dedicated to interviewing this Baron, and while this might be grating for some players, the dialogue was engaging and funny enough for me. This level gives players another opportunity to pick out Cate's dialogue for her, and I feel like this feature should have been expanded upon and given more of a spotlight during the overall campaign. Safecracker is the longest mission in the game, and I honestly enjoyed it a lot for the most part. I like the idea of going up this tower owned by the Baron and finding your way into his private office in order to collect some important documents. The part where you need to use the sunglasses in order to pinpoint where invisible laser beams are is great, and if you don't, the room fills up with poison. This is definitely ripped straight out of classic spy films, and it's about time we get some laser beams. The spy movie homages continue with a trip to outer space, and even Harm's space station has a nightclub lounge. This is wacky, and it's exactly what I love about No One Lives Forever. While I think that the gunplay is pretty serviceable, the game still has charm, and the level design is also quite decent. Again, it's no wonder why this game continues to have a cult following, and why people are begging for some kind of re-release, but more on that situation later. After Cate's brief space adventure, you go back down to Earth, and the game's finale starts to take place. While I don't want to spoil much, I think if you play this game for like an hour, you will know who the ultimate villains are, you will also know who will perhaps fake their own death, etc. The twists in this game's story aren't that shocking, but it's also not supposed to be a big mystery. Regardless, No One Lives Forever is a very competent shooter with a fuck ton of personality to it. I love how Monolith has the ability to mold any genre into great first-person shooters, and they did the exact same thing with Blood for example. NOLF is the ultimate spy shooter, and yes, I would rank it higher than GoldenEye. This game lets loose a lot more, and I feel like the developers are trying to grab me and say, let's just have fun with everything whenever I play this game. Even though there are stereotypical characters and constant spy tropes in this game, Cate Archer is still a character that you care about and want to see succeed. She's such a badass, and it's unfortunate that she doesn't seem to be held in the same light as Doomguy or Duke Nukem when she's just as cool. Anyway, I would recommend this game, but unfortunately I kinda can't. There is no way to purchase this game on Steam or GOG or any online storefronts, and that's because nobody knows who actually owns this game, and nobody associated with the property cares enough to look into it more. The game was developed by Monolith Productions, which is currently owned by Warner Brothers. However, NOLF was published by another company, Fox Interactive. There was a whole lot of company buyouts with Fox Interactive, and it all gets pretty messy. To simplify, there is a licensing clusterfuck between 3 companies: Warner Brothers, Activision, and 20th Century Fox, which has also been bought out by Disney at this point. No One Lives Forever isn't that big of a property for any of these companies to look into it. Even the guys over at Night Dive couldn't get really anything going with any of these studios, and the game is stuck in limbo basically. It's a shame because I would love to see NOLF re-released and potentially find a brand new, wider audience. The game is solid, and it's truly one of its kind with its presentation and humor. However, just like a spy, No One Lives Forever remains undercover until further instructions. Or you could just fucking pirate it, I don't care.